The general's voice cut through the briefing room like a blade. "We don't need a nurse on this mission." His dismissive glance fell on Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez, whose medical insignia seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "This is combat operations, not a field hospital." The other officers shifted uncomfortably as Maria stood at attention, her jaw set but her eyes betraying nothing. What General Morrison didn't know was that before Maria earned her nursing credentials, she had earned something else entirely, a designation that only existed in the shadows of military records, a qualification that would soon transform his dismissal into desperate gratitude when an Apache helicopter went down behind enemy lines and their rescue mission needed more than medical expertise. It needed precision. It needed patience. It needed a sniper. The morning sun cast long shadows across FOB Henderson as Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez checked her medical kit for the third time. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency through bandages, morphine, and tourniquets, the tools that had saved dozens of lives over her 2 deployments. But today felt different. Today, the weight of her secondary qualification pressed against her consciousness like a secret she'd carried for too long. "Vasquez!" General Morrison's voice boomed across the compound. She snapped to attention as he approached, his stars catching the desert light. "I've reviewed the mission roster. You're off the team." The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 months of preparation, countless briefings, and now this. "Sir, with respect, I've trained with Alpha Team for—" "You're a nurse, Sergeant." His tone brooked no argument. "This is a high-value target extraction, not a medical conference. We need shooters, not someone to check blood pressure." Around them, the other team members avoided eye contact. Staff Sergeant R. Rodriguez, whom she'd saved after an IED blast 6 months ago, studied his boots. Lieutenant Johnson, whose infected wound she'd treated in the field, suddenly found his rifle incredibly interesting. The sting of their silence cut deeper than the general's words. "Sir, my medical training includes nothing relevant to combat operations." Morrison's dismissal was final. "Report to the aid station. That's where nurses belong." As the general walked away, Maria felt the familiar burn of being reduced to a single dimension. They saw the red cross on her sleeve and assumed limitation. They saw compassion and mistook it for weakness. What they didn't see was the small, faded tattoo on her left shoulder blade, a scope crosshair that told a different story entirely. 2 hours later, the screaming started. "Apache down! Apache down!" The radio crackled with panic as Sergeant Thompson burst into the aid station. "General's calling all medical personnel. We got casualties incoming." Maria was already moving, grabbing her trauma kit and sprinting toward the helicopter pad. The dust cloud from the incoming Black Hawk painted everything in amber haze as wounded soldiers were rushed toward her station. But it was the radio chatter that made her blood run cold. "Alpha Team is pinned down," came Rodriguez's strained voice through the static. "The Apache crew is alive, but trapped. We've got enemy snipers on the ridgeline, approximately 800 meters northeast of the crash site. We can't get close enough for extraction." 800 meters. The number echoed in Maria's mind as she worked on a soldier with shrapnel wounds. 800 meters was well within her range, had been within her range since she'd earned her designated marksman qualification 3 years ago before she'd cross-trained as a medic. The qualification she'd kept current but never mentioned. The skill set that existed in her personnel file but somehow never made it into casual conversation. General Morrison's voice cut through the radio chatter like a prayer laced with desperation. "We need sniper support. The crew chief is bleeding out, and our designated marksman took shrapnel to the shoulder. Anyone with long-range capability, identify yourself immediately." The aid station fell silent except for the hum of medical equipment and the distant sound of helicopters. Maria's hands stilled on her patient's bandage as every eye in the room turned to her. Corpsman Jenkins, who'd worked beside her for months, slowly shook his head. "Don't even think about it, Sarge." Morrison made it clear. "Morrison's men are dying." Maria's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. She finished securing the bandage and stood, her movements deliberate and calm. "And I'm the only person on this base qualified to make that shot." The radio crackled again. "Blood loss is critical. We need that sniper support now, or we're going to lose them." Maria looked at her medical supplies, then at her rifle case in the corner, the custom weapon she'd maintained religiously but never discussed. The choice between who she was expected to be and who she truly was crystallized in that moment of crisis. She keyed her radio with steady fingers. "Base, this is Staff Sergeant Vasquez. I have sniper qualification and clear line of sight to the target area. Requesting permission to engage." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then Morrison's voice, strained with disbelief and desperate hope. "Vasquez, confirm your statement. You're saying you're qualified for precision shooting?" "Confirmed, sir. Designated marksman, current certification. I can make the shot." Another pause, then, "Vasquez, get to the roof, now." The climb to the roof felt like ascending through layers of her own identity. Each step up the metal ladder carried her further from the persona everyone expected and closer to the soldier she'd always been beneath the surface. Her rifle case felt familiar in her grip, an extension of herself that had been dormant too long. "Vasquez, what's your status?" Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece as she emerged onto the flat rooftop of the command building. "Setting up now, sir." Her voice was steady, professional, stripped of any emotion that might betray the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. She knelt at the roof's edge, unzipping her case to reveal the weapon that held more of her true self than any medical kit ever could. The rifle came together with practiced precision, scope mounted, bipod deployed, chamber loaded. Through her scope, the desert landscape transformed into a grid of calculations and possibilities. Wind speed, distance, elevation, temperature, variables that existed in her muscle memory like a second language she'd never forgotten how to speak. "I have visual on the crash site," she reported, adjusting her position. The Apache lay twisted against a rocky outcrop, its rotors bent at impossible angles. Smoke drifted from the engine compartment, and she could see movement in the cockpit, life clinging to hope. "In 2 enemy positions on the ridgeline. Primary target is behind the large boulder, approximately 820 meters northeast. Can you make the shot?" Morrison's question carried the weight of 3 lives. Maria's breathing slowed, her heartbeat settling into the rhythm she'd learned years ago in sniper school. The rhythm that separated amateurs from professionals, the living from the dead. "Affirmative, sir. I need Alpha Team ready to move on my mark." Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper adjusting his position, his rifle trained on the crash site below. Every few seconds he fired, the muzzle flash revealing his exact location. He was good, disciplined, patient, deadly, but he was also predictable. "Wind is 3 knots from the southwest," she murmured into her radio, more to herself than to anyone listening. "Temperature 92 degrees. Target is stationary behind hard cover. Exposure window approximately 4 seconds between shots." The enemy sniper fired again, and Maria began her count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. He would shift position now, adjust his aim, prepare for the next shot. 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. There, his shoulder would emerge from behind the boulder in 3, 2, 1. The shot felt like a whisper leaving her rifle, a soft exhale that carried months of suppressed identity across 800 meters of desert air. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper jerk backward, his weapon clattering against the rocks as he fell. "Target down," she reported, already tracking to the second position, moving to secondary target. "Jesus Christ, Vasquez," Rodriguez's voice came through the radio, filled with awe and relief. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" "Same place I learned to save lives, Sergeant." Her response was clinical, focused. The second target was moving now, aware that his partner had fallen, more dangerous, more unpredictable. "Secondary target is mobile. Stand by." The second sniper was smarter, using the terrain to mask his movement, but Maria had patience. The same patience she used during 12-hour surgeries, the steady calm that made her hands reliable when other people's lives hung in the balance. She tracked his movement through gaps in the rocks, predicting his path, waiting for the moment when training would meet opportunity. There, a flash of fabric, a hint of movement. The second shot was harder, a moving target at maximum range, wind gusting unpredictably through the canyon. But as her finger found the trigger, Maria wasn't thinking about the difficulty. She was thinking about the Apache crew bleeding out below, about Rodriguez and Johnson trapped behind inadequate cover, about the general who had dismissed her without knowing who she really was. The second shot traveled true. Both targets neutralized, she announced, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Alpha Team has a clear extraction route to the crash site. The rescue that followed unfolded with swift efficiency. Alpha Team reached the downed crew within minutes, Maria's medical expertise guiding them through radio communications as they stabilized the wounded pilot and extracted the crew chief, whose bleeding she had stopped from 800 meters away, not with bandages and pressure, but with precision and skill that existed in the shadows of her personnel file. 30 minutes later, as the medevac helicopter disappeared into the desert sky carrying 3 saved lives, General Morrison climbed onto the roof where Maria was cleaning her rifle with the same methodical care she used to sterilize surgical instruments. Staff Sergeant Vasquez. His voice had changed, the dismissive edge replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like respect. Sir. She didn't look up from her weapon, hands steady as she ran the cleaning rod through the barrel. I owe you an apology. The words came slowly, as if each one cost him something. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on your primary MOS. That was inappropriate. Maria finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. With respect, sir, you made assumptions about who I am based on what you thought I should be. A lot of people do that. Morrison nodded slowly, his eyes taking in the weapon she held with obvious familiarity. The small tattoo visible now at the edge of her rolled-up sleeve. The quiet confidence that had nothing to do with bravado and everything to do with competence. How long have you been dual qualified? 3 years as a designated marksman, sir. 4 years as a medic. I've never seen them as separate skills. They're both about precision, about knowing exactly what needs to be done and having the training to do it. She reassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency. The only difference is distance. As the sun set over FOB Henderson, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, General Morrison looked out over the compound where dozens of soldiers owed their lives to the quiet woman beside him. Some she had saved with medical expertise, others with marksmanship that bordered on the supernatural. All of them she had saved by being exactly who she was, not who others expected her to be. Vasquez, he said finally, I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star, and I'm putting you on permanent assignment to Alpha Team, full combat operations, not medical support. Maria shouldered her rifle case and picked up her medical kit, both tools equally important, equally part of who she was. Thank you, sir, but if it's all the same to you, I'd like to keep my medical certification current. Turns out you never know when someone might need a nurse who can also shoot. As she walked toward the setting sun, General Morrison understood that he had learned something profound that day about the dangerous assumptions we make and the extraordinary people who serve beside us in ways we never fully comprehend. Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez wasn't just a nurse, and she wasn't just a sniper. She was a soldier whose greatest strength lay not in choosing between who she was expected to be and who she truly was, but in embracing both with equal dedication and skill. Sometimes the most important shot isn't the one that eliminates the enemy. It's the one that shatters our preconceptions and reveals the heroes who have been standing beside us all along. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden talents and unexpected heroism, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These stories of our service members deserve to be told, and your support helps us honor their courage. Drop a comment below if you've ever been underestimated because of your primary role, whether in the military or civilian life. Now let's uncover how just a nurse became the most important person on a life-or-death rescue mission.